Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head down to England once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel once before. The last beer that I had from these guys was pretty impressive. I really enjoyed it, and so I'm curious to see how this one turns out, because we're going to go to the opposite end of the beer spectrum for this review. So for this one then, we will head to a little place called Newburn, close to Newcastle in the northeast of England, and we're going to have a look at my second beer from Alpha Delta Brewing. So this particular beer is called Eirene. It comes in at 7.5% ABV, and this one is a West Coast IPA. So yeah, really looking forward to this one. As you'll know if you've watched the channel for any length of time, I'm a huge fan of my West Coast IPAs, and so this one I think is also a little bit more unusual for Alpha Delta Brewing. Most of their IPAs tend to be the kind of hazy New England types actually. So when I saw this one on the House of Trembling Madness from York, I thought, you know, this is the one that I really want to have a go at actually. But the next time we review an Alpha Delta beer, I will make sure that I review one of the hazy New Englands for you actually. The last beer that I reviewed from these guys was the Tartarus. That was a big Imperial Milk Stout. I want to say that came in at around, you know, 8, 9, 10%, something like that. That was a little bit of a beast, that one, but it was very nicely executed, and so I'm glad that I can try something from the kind of lighter end of the spectrum, if you like. As I always say, when you're getting a feel for a brewery, something from the light end of the spectrum, something from the dark end of the spectrum, that will usually give you a good idea of what they're all about. So fingers crossed this one turns out to be a nice beer. My second beer, as I mentioned, from Alpha Delta, and I'm sure we'll review more from these guys at some point in the fairly near future. But anyway, let's crack on with this one then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Alpha Delta Brewing before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the fairly near future. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the English beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to whenever I get the opportunity, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Alpha Delta Brewing then, on to my brewery notes. So Alpha Delta Brewing are actually a very new kind of addition to the beer scene. These guys were founded back in 2019 by Ross Holland along with his father Steve, who had previously founded Box Social Brewing back in 2015. So Box Social Brewing are still operating, and both of these companies are based in the village of Newburn near Newcastle, as I said earlier, in the northeast of England. But Ross apparently got into brewing during a trip to Paris where he found a brew pub, and he was fascinated by how you could watch the whole process of brewing the beers while drinking the ones that had already been produced, and you know, he just kind of fell in love with this idea. But the name Box Social that he chose was taken from Victorian times, and essentially the Box Social people were kind of middle class folk that didn't really have the opportunity to socialise a lot of the time, and so they came up with the idea of hosting different events in their own homes to kind of get round this. But the whole idea that Ross had behind using this name was that he wanted different people to kind of socialise through craft beer, and you know, they kind of pushed that quite well actually. But they started off with a small 6-barrel brew kit and kind of gradually scaled it up over the years, but then in 2019 they moved to a larger premises with a 15-barrel brewery, and then this was when they launched the Alpha Delta Brewing brand as well. But apparently the idea behind Alpha Delta was to brew beers that were, you know, a little bit more kind of punchy and very big in flavour. The Box Social beers, I've had one of them before. That was an Imperial Brown Ale, if I remember rightly, and it was a very nice beer. But the idea behind the Alpha Delta one was to brew the kind of more American style beers, if you like. The Box Social Brewing beers were a little bit more kind of traditional styles, if you like, but brewed in the American style, if that makes sense. So the Alpha Delta brand seems to focus on different IPAs and some big Imperial stouts. There are 1 or 2 sours in there from what I've seen as well. But yeah, this brand that they have focuses on, you know, mainly hazy New England IPAs and big Imperial stouts with the odd West Coast IPA and stouts and things like that. But as of January 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced about 40 different beers under the Alpha Delta brand, and there's also been 25 beers released under the Box Social brand as well. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Box Social and Alpha Delta for the moment. If you guys want to learn more about either of these ones, you can check out the brewery website, which you'll find in the description below. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. I think both Alpha Delta and Box Social have their own Facebook pages and stuff like this, but you can also check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers released under both of these brands. So yeah, that's it for the history section of the video. Let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer and see how we go. So yeah, as you can see, the artwork on this beer is pretty nice. You can see Alpha Delta, of course, the Greek letters, which is quite nice. There you can see it's also written in Greek, Eirene. Underneath is written with also with the Greek text, and you can see Alpha Delta written on the back of this thing. But yeah, a 7.5% West Coast IPA, this one. It looks, as I say, it should hopefully be pretty nice. But yeah, I think this one should be really quite interesting, to be honest with you. As I said, I enjoyed the Tartarus that I had from these guys before, so I'll need to have a go at this one, and then also I'll need to have a look at a kind of New England type IPA in the future. But yeah, 440ml can, this one, and I think I paid about £5 for this beer. So to translate that to different currencies, probably about €6, maybe $6.50 American, and for those of you watching in Sweden, maybe between 55 and 60 Swedish kroner, something like that. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. So let's crack it and see how we go. But yeah, I'm curious to see how this beer turns out in terms of being a West Coast IPA, because a lot of the modern takes on the West Coast IPA, they tend not to be as bitter and things as the original West Coast IPAs were, which I always find a little bit disappointing, but I can understand why breweries do it, because people are not used to the kind of 80 or 90, 100 IBU beers that these West Coasters used to be. But yeah, this one certainly does look very, very nice actually. So I'm not sure how well the colour is going to show up on the camera, but this beer has a really rich kind of amber colour to it, and it's definitely more of a kind of natural haze rather than being too much from kind of wheatiness or oatiness, if you like. I think there is a bit of wheat in this beer. I think it said there is a little bit of wheat in this one. Oh, it actually has wheat and oats in it, which is interesting. I'm not sure that they always used to use oats in West Coasters. I know that some breweries liked to use a little bit of wheat in the West Coast IPAs, but yeah, so this one definitely has a little bit of a kind of lighter haze to it, if that makes sense. But you can see when we poured the beer, it poured with between a third and a half finger of a frothy, I would say kind of creamy coloured head. That's faded away to just be a very, very thin foamy layer, and it's kind of patchy on the top. But yeah, there's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. But I mean, it looks pretty much as you would expect from a West Coast IPA, to be honest with you. But a lovely kind of bright blood orangey amber colour, this one, which is definitely within reason for a West Coast IPA. But yeah, I really like how this one goes together. So yeah, in terms of appearance, thumbs up from me. Looks exactly kind of as you would expect, to be honest with you. You can't get a different range of colours and heads and things like that on these beers, but in terms of a West Coaster, this one certainly looks the part, and I can tell you right now there's some lovely big fruity aromas coming off this one actually. So yeah, let's have a closer look at the aroma then and see how we get on. Nothing overly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance, so yeah, let's go for it. The aroma, that is pretty damn nice, I have to say. And again, it's kind of what you'd expect. So this beer, it really does lean a little bit more towards the kind of bready end of the spectrum for a West Coaster. And for me, as I've told you in previous reviews, the archetypical West Coast IPA for me for quite a long time was the Sierra Nevada Torpedo, which really leans towards that kind of caramelly end of the IPA spectrum. But you know, having had Pliny the Elder recently, that showed me that a West Coast IPA can really be a little bit more bready, and the aroma of this one is really showing me that these beers they tend to be a little bit more, quite a few of them tend to be a little bit more bready actually, but you've got a good balance in the malt base here. So straight away with this one, you can smell that lovely sort of white bready base to the beer. You can smell a little bit of a bread crusty note as well, but overall the kind of bready backbone that this beer has is very, very smooth. But definitely there's a nice, if you take the aroma in, you can get a little tiny bit of bitiness from the wheat, and there's also, you can just get a little touch of oat in there too. But for me, the malt base in this beer is actually quite sweet. You can smell like a straight up sweet caramel. There's a little bit of a more kind of, there's a little bit more of a kind of oily McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing to this one, which I really like. So yeah, the malt base, again, it kind of has everything you'd expect. The more that I smell of it, the more that I start to get a little bit more of the sweetness, that slight sweetness from the oaty character. So yeah, the aroma of this beer overall is really quite interesting actually. I like how everything goes together with it from that perspective. So yeah, it's got the malty base that you would expect from the West Coast IPAs. Definitely a little bit more kind of bready and kind of caramelly and sweet leaning, if that makes sense. So yeah, interesting malt base from this one. The more that you smell of it, the kind of slightly more boozy it gets actually. But 7.5%, this one is a kind of classic strength West Coast IPA, if you like. Quite a few of the ones you'll find these days tend to be about, you know, like 6.2, 6.5, something like that. So this one is a little bit more of a kind of classic strength West Coast IPA, if that makes sense. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, and that's where our focus should be with these IPAs. On the hoppy side of things, you can smell, on the green side of things, there's a little bit of earthiness in this one. I think I've got a feeling there's mosaic in this beer because it comes across as quite oily and orange, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's mosaic in this. But yeah, nice little touch of earthiness there, big floral aromaticity. I don't find this beer overly dank, to be honest with you, so I'm curious about how the bitterness is going to turn out in this one. I've got a feeling that it might have a little bit more bitterness than, you know, your standard New England IPA, but I've got a feeling this one could turn out to be, you know, a 50-60 IBU type West Coast IPA, because it doesn't smell, you know, madly dank or madly floral or anything like that. So yeah, the kind of the green component of this beer, I think, goes together really nicely actually. So yeah, you've got a little bit of a lighter grassiness there at the front of the nose as well, but yeah, quite a big floral aromatic note to this one. I wouldn't describe it as being spicy or anything really like that, but it's got quite a nice big kind of just deep floral aromaticity to it, which I very much appreciate, absolutely. So yeah, thumbs up to them on the green component as well. I think the green component is important to get right, and it comes across very nicely. But on the fruity side of things, there is something very familiar about how this goes together. So this beer definitely has one of the more orangey hops in it. I think there's a big kind of you know, I don't think it's Amarillo that's in this one, because it seems a little bit too bright to be Amarillo. Amarillo is always kind of more oily and orange, if that makes sense, whereas this comes across more like a slightly brighter tangerine. So I want to say mosaic for this one actually. So the mosaic side of things gives you a lovely kind of bright juicy orange. There is a bit of a tropical note to this one as well, so I think there might be a wee bit of like Simcoe or maybe Galaxy or something like that in behind it, because you do get a little bit of that more kind of pungent passion fruit. And there's a few softer tropical notes in there, like Citra or something. So could it be a Galaxy Citra mosaic one? It could be something like that. The passion fruit seems a bit pungent to be simply Simcoe or something. El Dorado's another option that it could be. But yeah, there's definitely some softer tropical notes in there. A bit of mango, maybe, you know, little undertones of papaya, apricot, these kind of things. But then you've also got that slightly stronger passion fruity kind of note as well, which could be, you know, as I say, Simcoe, Galaxy, you know, Victoria's Secret would be another option, El Dorado. There's quite a few things that could be, but the mango-y notes that I'm getting out of this makes me want to say Citra. So I would think maybe Citra Mosaic, and there is something just familiar about the combination of things that's in here, but I think there's a third hop such as Galaxy or one of the slightly more kind of pungent tropical leaning ones. But yeah, yeah, a little bit of strong passion fruit, good bit of mango, a few kind of lighter tropical notes in there, and then you've got a big juicy kind of oily tangerine note, which I suspect is coming from Mosaic. I do think there's a bit of Mosaic in this beer. So yeah, always fun to play guess the hops with these IPAs, of course, but the fruity notes in this beer again are quite nice. They come across as slightly more oily in a sense as well, but as I say, it's not Amarillo. I'm pretty sure it's not Amarillo that's in this one. But yeah, take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it, but we're going to have a taste of this one now and just see how we get on. So yeah, let's go for it then. So this one is the Eirene, a West Coast IPA, coming in at 7.5% ABV from Alpha Delta Brewing in Newburn, down next to Newcastle in the northeast of England. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, that sounds nice. Sorry, just got to plug my camera control in again. Just went a little bit crazy there. But yeah, it does look, it does come across really nicely, this beer, I have to say. It does have a little bit of a bitter kick to it, actually. Yeah, this one it's not what I was expecting, actually, because it does have that big bitter element that you would expect of a West Coast IPA. So yeah, it's a bit of a surprise because I really didn't pick that up from the aroma. So yeah, surprised about that for sure. Yeah, but again, it's a solid beer, I have to say. I do like how that goes together. So thumbs up to Alpha Delta Brewing for this beer actually. Yeah, comes together very nicely. So yeah, where to start with this one then? It's not doing anything surprising with the West Coast IPA style, but it's very nicely executed. And I mean, there's so many IPAs on the market these days, you can't ask for much more than that. There's not so many West Coast IPAs, right enough, compared to the hazy New Englands. But yeah, this is a nicely done beer. So yeah, let's try and break down the flavour of this one for you then. So straight away with this beer, you can feel that nice kind of soft white bready quality just blanketing the middle of your tongue. You can feel that just forming the baseline of the beer. As you go further back on the palate there, as you reach that kind of borderline between the middle third and the back third of your palate, there's a few kind of grainy elements to the beer actually, which is again quite interesting. But yeah, it's, I would say, the as you go onto that back third of your palate, you definitely get a little bit more of a kind of wheaty presence out of the beer. You can feel there's a slightly thicker kind of white bready quality there, but at the very back of the palate it does have a wee bit more of a kind of wheaty bitiness out of it, which is very interesting. So yeah, it's a very kind of bready leaning West Coast IPA, this one, which I do like. So yeah, I really like how this one goes together. So yeah, the flavour of this beer, though, on the malty side of things, I really quite like. It does get a little bit more boozy the more that you drink of this one as well. But yeah, let's start from the back of the palate and just move forward. So at the very back of the palate, like I say, you've got a little bit of a wheaty bitiness there, and then it just smoothens out as you kind of come further forward. As you reach that border region with the kind of middle third of your palate, the thickness just drops away a little bit. You've got a wee touch of kind of graininess in there, as I said, and then underneath, or at the bottom layer of that middle third of your palate, as you move into that, you can feel there is a little bit of an almost crisp, white bready sort of note out of this one. On top of that, you've got a nice kind of smooth oaty layer, if that makes sense, and then in the centre of your palate, you do get a little bit more kind of sweetness out of the beer. So it's quite interesting because the brown sugary component of this beer, it almost kind of feels as if it's embedded into the oats. You do get a bit of that kind of very strong, boozy caramel note from the alcohol flavours in the beer. Absolutely. So there's a big boozy alcohol kind of flavour to this one actually. For a 7.5%, it's actually quite impressive how boozy this beer feels, to be honest with you. But then you also get an element of that kind of Werther's Original butter candy type thing from the beer too, which is great. And I do quite enjoy that. So yeah, there is a good little bit of that sort of butter candy kind of thing coming out of it. But as you move out from the very centre of your palate and move out towards the edges of the tongue, it's a little bit more kind of biscuity. It is a little bit more sort of biscuity and like McVitie's digestive biscuit like. So I do like how that goes together actually. So yeah, the kind of the malty side of this beer is quite interesting actually. I think the more that you drink of this one, the more it kind of smoothens out as well, and the oats start to have more of an effect on the beer. So yeah, you do get a bit more of the oaty smoothness out of this one the further that you go into the aftertaste. And it's interesting that to see what effect oats can have on a West Coast IPA, because as I said, oats I don't think were all that common to use in the West Coast IPAs back in the day, but they do have an interesting effect. I know that quite a few breweries used a bit of wheat, but not so much oats actually. So yeah, this is definitely, in some sense, the malty component of this beer is a little bit more of a kind of modern take on the West Coast IPA, but everything else about it is very, very authentic. But yeah, I think that covers the malty side of the beer in terms of describing the flavour. I think that covers it quite well. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, let's talk about that. So in the back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of a kind of earthiness to the beer, but as you move further forward, the earthiness just fades away a little bit. And then you start to get more and more of the kind of floral aromaticity to the beer, and you can feel that really building up and building up as you move further forward on the. You can really feel that. You can really feel that as you move further forward on the sides of your palate there. It gets a bit more kind of big and floral and aromatic in that sense as well. There is a little bit of a kind of piney, resinous quality to this one actually. So yeah, I do like how this kind of builds up. You do get a wee bit of piney resinous quality underneath this one, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's perhaps a little bit of Chinook being used in this beer, because the more and more that this kind of flavour progresses, if you like, the more you do get a wee bit of that kind of just big dank piney resin, but it also has a wee touch of a kind of spicy character to it as well, so that might indicate that there's a little bit of Columbus in here actually, come to think of it. The green component of this beer in terms of flavour comes across as very familiar to me actually, so I like that about it for sure. But then yeah, around the front curve of the palate there's a little bit of a lighter kind of grassy note to it as well, which I think is really interesting, and that just adds a nice little bit of balance to the beer. But on that front third of your palate you've got that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So for me, I like how this one goes together in that sense as well. It's quite classic and a little bit more old school in that sense as well. So yeah, if you go to that border region between middle third and front third of your palate, there is a bit of a kind of bigger bready note there, and that just gives you the boost into the kind of fruity side of the beer. But at the back of that front third of your palate, there's a wee touch of a stronger grapefruity note there. Then it evolves to be more kind of passion fruity, if that makes sense. So there is quite a bit of a kind of pungency to the fruit in this beer actually, which I like. So yeah, fruity side of this beer does definitely have a wee bit of a kind of pungent kick to it at the back, but as you move further forward it gets a little bit more kind of light and kind of mango-like, if that makes sense. But you've also you've also got a nice little bit of a kind of lighter mango quality in there, like I said. So I think as you move further forward you get a wee bit of a kind of softer mango note there. I don't know if there's so much in the way of these kind of apricot-y type flavours and stuff that I was picking out from the Aroma actually, but then as you reach the front half of that front third of your palate, it's distinctively more oily and kind of tangerine and orangey. So a little bit of mosaic in there, I'm sure, quite a bit, there is a bit more of a kind of oiliness to the beer, but I really like how all of that goes together in this one. I mean, the more oily orange character is interesting too. There is a wee bit of zest on that kind of front tip of your tongue almost, so I don't think there's enough there though to say that there would be a little bit of like Equinault or Centennial or something like that, but there is a wee bit more of a kind of slightly lemony type flavour there, but it's really minimal. I don't think that's coming from Centennial or Equinault or Motueka or whatever being added into the brew. So yeah, this is it's an orangey. I think it leans more towards that orangey side of things, and it's got a good tropical kind of backbone to the fruity component as well. But yeah, I mean overall the flavour of this one is pretty old school and pretty nice from the fruity perspective. So yeah, good bit of passion fruit, good little bit of mango in there, and then some nice kind of more oily, juicy tangerine type notes in it as well. So yeah, take a little bit of time and just ponder on that fruity side of things, because I think that's one of the nicest components of the beer. The fruity side of this beer I think goes together very, very well. But yeah, in terms of a West Coast IPA, definitely one of the more kind of bready examples that you're going to come across, and you do feel the oatiness coming out of the beer a little bit the more that you drink of it. But a lovely example of a West Coast IPA, and definitely worth trying if, like me, you're into this style. But yeah, let's round off the review then by looking at the mouthfeel. So so yeah, for me, this beer is at the kind of top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied. The carbonation is very smooth. It's actually got quite an oily mouthfeel, this one, to be honest with you. It's one of the more oily IPAs that I've come across in recent times, but it's got quite a big thickness underpinning it as well. I guess probably because of the oats and the wheaty component there. I think the wheat does actually thicken the beer up a little bit the more that you drink of it. So this beer does feel thicker and thicker as you drink more and more of it. But yeah, it's an interesting mouthfeel to it. This one, as I say, it's quite. On one side of the coin it's very oily, but on the other side of the coin it's very kind of thick and almost a little bit turbid, if that makes sense. But yeah, there's a good bitterness to this one. I think this beer is maybe about 70 or maybe even 80 IBUs, so it does have a bit of that kind of classic West Coast bitterness to it. So thumbs up to Alpha Delta for being bold and taking it in that direction, because a lot of breweries, they tend to just, they do everything right except the bitterness, but they have got the bitterness quite spot on in this one for me. But yeah, the malt base, like I say, it's got a nice smoothness to it. The oats give you a little bit of a kind of sweetness later on, and you've got a good kind of oily, you've got a good little bit of an oily kind of brown sugar in it as well, which I think is quite nice. But then the more that you drink of it as well, you get more of those big kind of juicy oily fruits out of it. So yeah, a really nice example of the West Coast IPA. Not kind of quite what you would expect in honesty, going by the kind of more modern takes on the West Coast IPA. So this one has everything you'd expect though, you know, a big oily, juicy fruity character, a good big green component to it as well with a bit of bitterness, but then you've also got you've got a bit of sweetness in the malt base as well, but it's definitely got a bit of thickness from the kind of wheaty and oaty components as well, which I think is a little bit more unusual, to be honest. But otherwise, solid kind of classic West Coast IPA for me. So thumbs up to Alpha Delta Brewing for this one. So yeah, I think we can round off this review there. But yeah, thank you again for watching my beer reviews. You know, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Alpha Delta Brewing, and I'm sure we will return to these guys at some point in the near future. My next review from these guys, I think, will be a more kind of New England type IPA. But yeah, this one was the Eirene West Coast IPA, 7.5% ABV from Alpha Delta Brewing in Newburn, close to Newcastle in the northeast of England. Thank you again for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and see you guys in the future reviews.